All right. Thank you. Thank you, CRPN Central. This is Dr. Fox. Please like, comment, subscribe. It helps the mission more than you know so that I can do more for you. So, what do you think of our Groundhog friend? Actually, it is Groundhog's Day. Happy Groundhog's Day, everyone. I didn't hear the news. Did the groundhog see the shadow? If you're watching, I'd appreciate it. I'm not going to look it up right now because I want to serve every single one of you. Just a reminder, CRPN is free for sites to join. You get free access to trials, some of the best financial services on the market if you need it. If you don't, no big deal. And for sponsors, it saves you a ton of money. And I do mean a ton of money and time. That's our big promise to you. We want to make sure that you are set up for success. Welcome, everyone, to another Monday. This is TrialSide Chats. We'll get into that in a minute, but my gosh. Okay, so I just worked the aging reports for our sites. And I have to tell you, one thing that I'm seeing across the board is this weird, oh, we've submitted this to the sponsor for approval excuse from big CROs. It could be like a $25 invoice. We've submitted it to the sponsor for approval. I suspect that that is not being submitted to the sponsor approval. My guess is CROs that you're allowed some kind of a limit or a cap for approval on these certain things. And that is meant to buy you time to do your internal processes. Anyone else out there seeing this as a trend? It's almost like there's a script. If the sites ask for the late payments, just tell them it's with the sponsor. We'll take care of it later. I don't know. I don't want to sow distrust, but I see the same exact language across multiple sites, across the same CRO sometimes. So sometimes you have to wonder if it's just an internal policy. Welcome to TrialSide Chats, the place for CRPN communities to come together, talk about best practices so that we can raise each other up, have good quality research finance, and save as many lives as possible. We're going to start with our disclaimer. Like always, this is an experience podcast. I'm going to share experiences with you. I am not a lawyer. I don't claim to be a lawyer, and don't take it like that. Please listen at your own risk. If you do need a lawyer, though, I know of some really, really good ones. Edie, you're probably at Scope right now. You can't see this, but big shout out to Edie, Edie Life Science Law, edielaw.com. If you need a lawyer, talk to Edie, confirm things with her, and listen at your own risk. By continuing this video, you have just agreed to this disclaimer. If you don't agree to it, shut it off right now. I don't need the stream. I don't need the view. I'd rather you be safe and happy. So let's move forward on this. The ground rules. This is an open mic. If you are listening in right now, please feel free to send a comment, send a LinkedIn comment, send me an email. I have all the venues opened up. I will do my very best to monitor comments and continue the podcast flow. Please be patient with me. If I don't get to your comment during the live event, I'll address it on the next event. And importantly, I really appreciate every single one of you for supporting the CRPN mission. We can talk about anything financial, my friends, anything. However, this is a very sensitive and confidential subject. Everything must be confidential. Do not name names. We're not shouting and pointing fingers at certain entities. We're looking at concepts. Do not name organizations, not allowed. And if we can talk about these as case studies, as concepts, maybe we can all come together, sites, sponsors, and CROs alike, so that we can try to figure out some best practices out there and help each other out. Really, really cool story. I just had the opportunity of talking with a very, very large CRO executive, super duper director. We came together. We talked about some frustrations. Now I have a better understanding about why CROs do certain things. It's never out of malice, my friends. They have intentions too. So we all have to come together and make this work properly. So let's start with an icebreaker. What is the oldest invoice you have ever seen, and how did you resolve it? Ooh, that was a good one. So I have had invoices that have celebrated 1 year birthdays before. My record is 3.5 years old. 3.5 years. 1 year of that was me doing follow-up. The other 2.5 was it fell through the cracks. It happened during one of our financial monitoring visits. It was a pretty substantial invoice, and the site really needed the money, and they spent money to get it. So We kept it on the aging report. We kept following up and following up. And finally, how did I resolve it? Well, you can follow up and send emails until your fingers get tired typing emails. But unless you really start to give your aging process some teeth, some kind of teeth, I'm not saying be mean. I'm not saying be aggressive. I'm not saying scare off your CROs and your sponsors, but just be cordial and firm and say, this has been a breach of contract. As a result of this, there is some accountability behind it. If we don't get this fixed, something's going to have to happen. And most of the time, when you uh, discuss it, say, hey, I'm really sorry. This is happening. If we can't get this resolved, I'm going to have to get this escalated. I'm going to have to report this to my administration. We may have to run into some delays as a result. Monitor that with your legal team friends if you're ever going to type that. But if you can give your aging report some teeth, all the way from, I'm sorry, we can't have a monitoring visit until your account is current, all the way to, okay, this is bogus. And if we don't do this, we're going to have to discontinue the trial because it is no longer providing the resources for patient safety. Any kind of a teeth like that, where there's a consequence for not paying the bills, where they're going to have to do a lot more than just say, oh, it's with the sponsor for approval. That is how we resolved that one. It took a year. I finally convinced the site to have some cordial teeth. And once there was a consequence, it was paid within a week. You just have to have the teeth, everyone. Sites, how old is your invoice record? How many birthdays have you celebrated on invoice? And what happened with it? Was it a legitimate expense that you were entitled to by contract? Was it a bogus invoice that you sent and you're like, okay, this is, we thought this was okay. We thought we could get this money. And then they came back and disputed it. And you said, oh, you know what? You're right. Never mind. We'll have to adjust it off and take it off of our accrual. However that might be, what's most important is you really, really want to pay attention to the aging of your money. The older the money is, the more expensive it's going to be for you to collect, and the more devalued it is for everyone in the industry. Just remember that. So we resolved it. In this case, we got paid. I was very, very happy about it. So today we're going to start talking about the book again. We're continuing our journey. There's the book. It's thank you so much for everyone for your comments. I've gotten a number of comments on the book, some good questions about the book. We have some updates to the book that we're going to be making. We have some improvements that are coming, and we even have some expansions to the book. It is very well received, and I'm thankful that everyone out there who has supported the CRPN mission with the book has enjoyed it or has found it helpful. Maybe if I can get permission from some of the folks, we'll keep it anonymous, but maybe I can use some of those emails later on in the podcast so you can see what these people are talking about, what they're using this information to do. This is a legitimate, active textbook. This is if you were to get this book, you would at least have a baseline of understanding about how to survive in this industry as a clinical research site, all the way from contract and all the way to financial management, to archive and doc storage, you name it. The fundamentals are in this book it's like a boot camp. You can do that. If it's on Amazon right now, that's the QR code. The QR code is for Amazon. If you want to contact CRPN directly, we can get you 10% off, free shipping, and I'll sign it if you want me to. We'll go from there. All right. So last week we talked about the pre-study activities. We talked about all of the things that happen before that CTA is signed, all the way from the business development, feasibility, negotiations, everything in the ops, all the pillars, everything. Today, let's focus on that one thing that everyone thinks about with clinical trials, the active study phase. So the contract is signed, you're getting good to go. Your regulatory team, they've got things submitted to the IRB, you're good to go. You've got your operations team, they've got all the training done, they've got source created. The sponsors come in and said, we're going to send you an invite for an SIV, and we're going to activate your site. And once you get the green light, the patients start coming in and we're going to start enrolling patients. That is active study, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So the active study starts at SIV, site initiation visit. That is just like I said, all of those pieces are coming together: legal, regulatory, operations. Everything has approval, everything is signed, everything is put together so that generally a CRA will schedule an SIV. They'll come on site, make sure everything is good to go, and they'll say, here's your letter, here's your site activation letter, here's your green light letter. So if you're a regulatory team or you're an operations team, be sure that you let your finance team know about the green light. Most of the time when CRPN does an audit, the green light date is almost never included in financial records. Never, which is absolutely crazy to me. And here's why. Most of the time, if you go into a contract that's properly negotiated, those annual fees that we always talk about, guess what they're pivoted on? Most of the time, they are on the anniversary of the CTA signature or the anniversary of site activation. You need a green light date, finance teams, to properly track, manage, and even forecast your annual fees. Really, really important. SIV happen. We're activated with green light. We're good to go. Now comes the recruitment process. Here it is. We're calling our patients. We're looking at medical records. We're paying vendors to use AI sometimes to look at medical records. We're hiring third-party vendors to be the phone people to try to screen patients and save the time for the coordinators. Recruitment is its own giant beast, and there are a ton of vendors out there that sites could use. It's really important to say could, because sites, as independent contractors, these may be services that are paid for you, but it is at your full discretion whether or not you can use them. That's really, really important. It's very rare that the person who's literally being paid by the sponsor to provide a service is going to volunteer that information to you. Most of the time, it's going to be, hey, this is a free service for you from the sponsor. This is a free service. Let's take a bunch of site time to have meetings. This is a free service. And the sites are like, no, I'm good. We're good. Oh, no. This is a free service. Do we have to? No, we don't have to do this. Well, it's not really required, but it's there for you, so you may as well use it. Nah, I'm good. If it doesn't work for your site, you're going to know. And sometimes it's better to sit there and say, I really appreciate it. It's nice of the sponsor, but if they wanted to put money into this, they probably just should have increased the budget for the site instead of parceling out a third party like that. So after recruitment, we've identified patients. These are good screenings. We've done pre-screens. We've inclusion, exclusion, everything put together. We've had a call with the patient where they're interested. We're going to do the informed consent. We're going to go through a screening visit. We're going to take all these tests. We're going to determine if the patient is, in fact, a good candidate for the trial. Then comes the magic moment. The patient is going to get enrolled. They're going to randomize into the trial. They're going to start following the path of the schedule of assessments. You're going to go through visit after visit over top, service after service over bottom, until that timeline is complete, or amendments extend the timeline, and then you can complete it. You perform the trial. That is the actual performance of the trial. The patients go through, they perform visits, the sites complete data according to Alcoa C, they complete the source. You go through rounds and rounds of monitoring visits on the way, interim monitoring visits, IMV, until finally the patients have either withdrawn from the study. Maybe they chose not to be in the trial anymore. They have completed the study. So they've finished the end of visit, the end of study visit. And so the patients are now, quote, off of the trial. And then you have the patients off the trial. Your site is kind of just sitting there waiting, continued monitoring visits, making sure all the data is okay, until finally the CRA says, okay, we're good. We need to schedule a closeout visit. We are done collecting data with your site. We need to close it out as a formal visit. So after everything is performed, and keep in mind, it could be years from the time the last patient walks into your the site until the site has been closed out. And the reason why that happens is because sponsors tend to not really want to close out one site when they have 30 others that are running, just in case they need to keep an eye on the data. If they need access to the data for some kind of a reason, maybe they saw a nuance at another site and they want to double check it's not happening at this other site, they're not going to schedule closeout until all of the sites are ready to close out. So sites, you may have to be holding on to a trial that you had patients enrolled. You may be having to keep that on your books, keep it with the IRB, keep it submissions every single year, maintain storage, maintain this. You can't take the source off into archiving until you've closed it out. You may have to maintain a trial for many, many months after the patient is no longer on the trial. Finally, you schedule the closeout visit, the CRA comes through, they sit there and say, okay, everything looks good. We're going to do IP reconciliation. We're going to look at the data again. Okay, everything's good to go. Queries are resolved. We're going to issue closeout. We're closing out your site. That is the end of closeout. And once you have closed out a trial at a site, you have officially completed the active study cycle. What happens in a finance team during that active study cycle? Well, it's one thing to sit there and say, we're going to look at patients, we're going to recruit, we're going to actually perform the trial, we're doing all of this. But on the back end, there's another layer dedicated to finance, and they have to always stay ahead of things. They have to always make sure that the contract is followed. They have to make sure that they invoice and bill everything properly. When money comes through, they're going to have to double check and make sure that everything was paid according to contract. So it starts with, and I should say that these steps are going to be in much, much more detail later. So if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. But many of the details in every single one of these steps in finance, for one, there's pages and pages dedicated to it in the book, but also there's going to be entire sessions of the podcast dedicated to these. So during an active study, one of the biggest things that finance teams will do is, of course, they're going to send invoices. Well, that's going to be a huge lift on the finance team side and also on the regulatory and operations side. You can't just have a finance team blindly sending invoices into the industry without making sure that they have all of the pieces of information that they need to ensure proper and smooth invoice approval. I wonder how much time in this industry is wasted based off of a site sitting there and just sending invoices without any knowledge of how to send an invoice or any knowledge about what should be in that invoice or importantly what should not be in that invoice. It's important. So I think that we do waste a lot of time in the industry on that. And if we could try to button that up and have an understanding, we follow the contract, we do invoices appropriately, and we can save a lot of time and money for everyone involved. I think that would be good. So once invoices are done, this also includes tracking of accrual for any kind of an auto payment, so things that don't require invoices. Once you have that buttoned up where you are submitting claims for revenue or tracking claimed revenue, that's how you build your aging report. That's how you build your aging processes. Once you get paid, then there's the process of course, remitting, and that is matching the items from a bank deposit or some kind of a retrieval system to the actual payments to the sponsor's remittance document. That is key. Those three pieces that are triangulating together in remittances are what make really, really good and strong remittances. The remittances will be recorded, documented, and then subtracted from the known aging systems. That way that we know it's no longer owed to the site. So we take it away from the aging, we mark it as revenue, and we have a continuous process like that. As a result of the tracking of revenue, accrual, plus remitting, Then we go into financial accountability. Financial accountability is that aging process that I was just talking about. It's, hey, according to our records, this is what's owed to us. This is how late it is, and we need to get this fixed. That is a very, very active process. It should be done every single month. You need to quote, work your aging report, both on invoice side and on auto pay side. And that has to be very, very continuous. You're going to have to work with operations and regulatory teams. You're going to have to figure out problems or reasons why something's not getting paid. And you're going to have to work together to fix it. As a result of the financial accountability, you're going to start to do reports. You're going to do accrual, all of the different health reports for a site, the financial health reports. That's how you can really start to look and see how healthy your site is on a financial level. And then finally, there's disputes. So you've got disputes. Hey, we're not going to pay this because the site has to sit there and say, well, is that a legitimate reason? Do we have to redispute, say, no, you're wrong, and this is why? You're going to have to do a lot of back and forths. And honestly, sometimes you're going to have to adjust things off. Even in really good financial management systems, you're going to have noise. You're going to have miscommunications. There's going to be reasons why bad invoices are sent, and you're going to have to work very diligently to keep those at bay. Of course, for anyone out there, the older the money, the less you earn, the more watered down it's going to be. So you want your aging to be as good as possible. In a perfect world, there wouldn't be any outstanding invoices and payments. That's my dream for clinical research someday. If you ever want to get into that, let me know. Finally, after disputes, this is research, and there are things that change all the time. Uh, maybe enrollment was sluggish. Maybe the sponsors didn't understand that. Maybe they submitted to the FDA, and the FDA said, "Well, now you're going to have an additional piece of information. We want this extra lab. You need to ensure safety through this." Or maybe the sponsor sat there and said, "You know what? We went a little bit overkill on the visits, so I don't think we need this visit or that visit." That's when amendments come in, and the finance team is very, very into the amendments. Every time you have to identify a change in the trial, you're going to have to assess whether that change is going to change also the budget in a substantial way. And as a result, amendments are going to be huge when it comes to finances. You'll have to sit there, renegotiate, go through a whole renegotiation process again. It gets pretty tedious, but those responsibilities, believe it or not, sites, sponsors, CROs, those responsibilities on a finance team are often a second thought. Very rarely in some of the small sites that we see do we identify strong, and I mean strong, payment systems. Sometimes they're super good at sending invoices because it's really easy. They just click a couple buttons and they're good to go, and they never really follow up on the invoices. They never track the aging. Sometimes they send invoices and they just trust whatever the sponsor and CRO tells them. I've had sites say, "Hey, you know what? This CRO, they have a much bigger system than we do. Why should we question it? Let them and fund the infrastructure behind it. We'll just trust them and take whatever they give us." Unfortunately, that was a real conversation. So when it comes to the active study, the only thing I can say is, and I've said this before, finance is everyone's job. If you have the book, I'm sure you'll see that a couple times in pages, but seriously, finance is everyone's job. And while this is a specialized, dedicated skill that someone on your team should have, odds are you can just hire someone full time to do this. They can't do it alone. You're going to have constant crosstalk with all of your internal teams, and then you're going to have to know who to talk to on the external side. Who am I going to talk to in the case of a problem? It's huge. Finance really is everyone's job. If you watch this later, I would love to hear a story that you had at your site about how literally finance was everyone's job, where everyone came together, there was a problem, and they resolved it. I'd love to hear it. If you'd be willing to send those out here, I think we'll have a good time with it. All right, so let's get into some case studies. And I've got a surprise case study for you today. We're going to see what we can do. Uh, so we just finalized a trial contract, and the sponsor is making us use a payment portal, and they won't allow us to use our site's management email. They want an individual, which violates our site's SOPs. This is big right now, sites. This is huge. There are certain payment vendors that are sitting there saying, no, you can't use a group email. You have to use this individual email. It's against our SOPs, it's credibility, whatever. But um, this is big. And I have seen sites lose trials because of this. I can tell you from personal experience that once you take that road, once you start saying, oh, just give them what they want, we want the trial, you're pretty much dooming your finances. People disappear a lot. People quit, they get fired, they leave. And when you start latching your entire site onto an individual for the entire financial performance of your trial, you have just assumed a substantial risk for the trial's performance, for the financial sustainability, and for your ability as a business to operate. In this situation, this is worth having some major conversations with your site to identify if the trial that is bullying themselves into your independent contractor business with accounting software that you did not authorize, that you did not validate, that you're literally being forced to use. um, have a really honest talk with them and say, do we need this trial at all? Because if they're going to do this, I can only imagine what they're going to do in the future. This is not great. um, if it were my site and there was a sponsor doing that, I would put myself in a situation as soon as possible that I could say, no, thank you, and I could still pay my people. Um, it's kind of like, if you think about it, you know how there's restaurants out there that have certain credit cards on their doors? We accept this credit card, we accept that credit card. So, what would happen if you had a customer who walked into a restaurant with a credit card that was not set up at that restaurant? Oh, here, I've got this credit card. I'd like to make my payment with this. And the restaurant's like, I'm sorry, that's not our deal. We don't accept that. Um, what would happen? Well, if the customer really wanted to eat at the restaurant, they'd pull out another form of payment that was accepted and they'd do it. It's the same thing here. You've got a sponsor coming to a site saying, hey, here's my payment card. Here you go. And the site's saying, yeah, we don't have the systems in place to use that. I'm sorry. And we're not going to set up an entire line of logistics dedicated to this one trial. It's just not going to work. So um, there's a term called non-adopter. I would highly recommend you try that when it comes to some of these payment portals. If you ever get to a point where it's use our payment portal, don't work with us, I'm going to leave that up to the sites for their decision, but I think that you know my opinion. Okay, the sponsor's budget lists items as standard of care or SOC, but our billing team systems says that they aren't. In other words, these are not standard of care. Yep. So this is very, very common. You've got budgets that come through, especially in the oncology space. Oncology is really, really bad with this one. But they will sit there and say, every single budget, it's SOC in the schedule of assessments grid. And when it says SOC, it means zero. So it doesn't add anything to the budget. The assumption is, according to standard of care, this is something that the clinical trial candidate would be going through anyway. Their insurance would be paying for this, therefore we don't have to pay for it. Huge Stark law, sunshine, anti-kickback situations here. Sites, if you've ever read a contract, of course, you know you never, never, ever, ever double dip. I would never condone that. You don't double dip, meaning you don't get something from an insurance company and then you turn around and build a sponsor. That's not right. And we all recognize that's not right. And there's major federal law in place to ensure that there are penalties for people who do that, because there are some bad performers. There's people who have done that and they've skimmed the system. They've done things they shouldn't. And that's why we have laws in place. Unfortunately, it has moved to the other end, where now sponsors will they'll use the regulations as an excuse to make the budget as low as possible. We're just going to mark everything standard of care. And as a result, our budget's going to be lower. We're going to get more work done. We won't have to pay as much done. But there are many, many times when if sites don't question that, they get stuck with the bill because, or the patient's going to get stuck with the bill. They're going to agree to it. They're going to have the patient starting to perform the trial. And then all of a sudden, the patient's going to come in very, very angrily with an insurance bill in their hand. They said, "What the heck is this? I shouldn't have to pay this. I'm part of the trial." Yeah, you don't want to get to that point, sites. So and the time to do that is right here. If a sponsor ensures that if they're claiming that something is standard of care in the schedule of assessments, you better be sure that that is exactly standard of care. There is a term called a coverage analysis that answers this very, very well. A coverage analysis is an assessment of the protocol versus standard of care versus things that might happen to determine and to solely determine if all of the things that are claimed to be standard of care are in fact standard of care. Big shout out to some of the very big IRBs out there. They have amazing coverage analysis services. If you are ever in a situation where you're fighting over standard of care sites, number one, I highly recommend you seek out a coverage analysis. It's not hard to find. Very, very big IRBs. Look them up. They can do that. Number two is and a big if, you have to do a coverage analysis. Be sure you make that uninvoiceable line item. It can literally just be a pass through. You don't have to pay for it if it is required, in fact, to perform the clinical trial startup. Remember that. Coverage analysis is a very, very common and standard practice. Sponsors are well aware of the need to do it, especially if they're claiming standard of care. And honestly, it saves everyone money and compliance when you do, when you ask the folks to perform a coverage analysis. So that would be my first thing is if this person has not yet done a coverage analysis, request a coverage analysis, get it build into the sponsors group, and then have a third party determine if something is standard of care. You'll know with that third party. They'll have a really cool report out for you, and then you'll know everything about it. All right, TrialSide chat friends, all 0 of you right now. So I figured I'd try something different here, and we're going to do a little bit of an analysis and assessment. And just a full disclosure, it is super hard, super hard to go over this content because this is very controlled. It's very confidential. You have to be sensitive and respectful of the people that you're working with. And at the same time, you have to try to figure out how to do case studies and concepts so that people can learn. We can start talking about these things so that there's an understanding of what is responsible and what isn't necessarily good for our trial participants. So let's try this. Here's just an example of a list of invoiceables that came in during a negotiation. So what is missing in this negotiation for invoices? What's missing in the invoices? Now, mind you, this was a standard, typical word processing document, spreadsheet with a budget on it. Here you go, take a look, and then we'll do some back and forth negotiations. This was literally the first offer on the spreadsheet. 3 line items. That was the offer. That was it. Nothing else. Now, keep in mind that, that was the first offer. So it is fully expected as a site to add line items to this. And this is why. Let's look at some of the things about this trial. This is a cardiovascular heart failure trial. Okay, so it's a very, very difficult, extensive trial. It includes survivor follow-ups. In other words, you're going to have to stick with this trial for a very long time. Sometimes these trials, you're going to have to try to look at trial participants, maybe look at their records, something like that, until unfortunately they pass away. It's a survival kind of a follow-up. So let's hope that could take a very long time. This is an extensive year by year by year trial. It's estimated to be a 3-year active trial, and then you have survivor follow-ups after that. So you're looking at years of commitment. And it has an estimated screen fail percentage rate based off of feasibility at 65%. The enrollment goal is 7. So with just those pieces of information, without giving you anything else, my first question to you would be, do you think that those 3 items are sufficient to support a multi-year complex trial with an enrollment goal of 7 but a screen fail percentage of 65? For anyone out there who said, well, yeah, we could do it for that, you just made it a lot harder for sites out there to serve their patients. This is not a cool trial. This is not going to be very helpful. This is very, very underfunded on many, many different ways, and we can go through that. So I'm not going to tell you this answer right now. I'm going to let this simmer for a week. If you're at Scope and you're at the airport, maybe look at this screen, try to figure out what you would do on this negotiation. How would you adjust this negotiation solely with the information that you have in front of you here? Let's see if we can get any comments. We can revisit this next week. We can try to talk about what exactly can be done. And I'm going to leave it at that. So, big news. I'm super excited. Have you heard of Manasa? Manasa with Dr. Dinawi and the group there. Manasa is going to be in Chicago this year. It's a couple months from now. We'll try to get a link down in the subscription in the video here, but I'll be at Manasa. I'm super excited. I've been honored to. I was asked to give a talk about how to expand out negotiations, such as the one you just saw. We're going to talk about the negotiations. We're going to talk about, by the time you walk out of the door, you'll have a little bit of an understanding about the infrastructure that you need to put around all of your invoiceables so that you can do proper negotiating. And importantly, you can do proper financial management for responsible trial performance. I think that's really important to note. This is not a giant cash grab. This is not a bunch of greedy people trying to make a profit off of sponsors. This is simply professionals who know what it's going to take to properly perform a clinical trial for their clients, the sponsors. And to do that, unfortunately, you're going to have to navigate some really, really tricky waters with people who honestly have no idea what it takes, but they're simply told what they can and cannot approve. It's a toxic environment, and it's something that I really hope that we can fix together. So if you haven't joined CRPN yet sites, free for sites to join, no obligations, leave anytime. I'll do my best to get you free clinical trials, and we'll get you education. If there's ever something I don't know, the CRPN community is huge. It's big. There's over 200 sites globally. I know vendors. I know groups. If you need something, welcome to the community. I want to make sure that you have it. That's our commitment to our site partners. For sponsors, yeah, CRPN is streamlined. It's approved. We have demonstrated time and time again the amount of time and savings to your trial so that you can be successful. If you have any questions at all about CRPN, our services, or what we do for our communities, please feel free to reach out. The 3 QR codes are right there. It has been an amazing time. Thank you so much to everyone out there who's not watching. Have fun at Scope. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. This is Dr. Fox. Please like, comment, subscribe, share your voice. I'll see you next time.